Hey folks, welcome to another edition of Big Al's Rockin' Podcast. And if you are new to this show, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. This week I have famous author Martin Popoff, and he's going to talk about this glorious book, Guns N' Roses at 40. And my favorite thing about this whole book is the quote on the back, the band that drove a stake through the heart of hair metal. That is
Yeah.
awesome. How are
Yeah.
you doing, Martin?
Good, good. It's funny that quote I got on a radio show and argued with some guys about that because we had a whole debate about that. So in some respect, this is a band that drove a stake through the heart of hair metal, and they were also hair metal at the same time. I make that argument as well throughout the book. So it's really interesting that that they were this very kind of like dirty, incendiary, rule breaking version of hair metal, but still they kind of did fit in the whole thing at the same time. So, anyways, that was that was just a memory that I had.
Well, I thought that was a great quote. And, Sweet Child of Mine is the epitome of hair metal, in my opinion.
Exactly, yeah, and a lot of people, if you're a real massive Guns N' Roses fan and a purist, and you defend them to the death, and you think they're godly in every way, a lot of people bristle at that idea of calling them a hair metal band. But the look is essentially that. They're right there in L.A. They're on the strip. They're the lyrics, musically speaking, being derived of sort of Aerosmith, which is a hair metally kind of thing. So yeah, they kind of fit, but they were special because they were very authentic and quite dangerous at it.
Right. So tell us a little bit about what you're covering in this particular book.
Yeah, so the idea here is that this is not a concept that I came up with. It's Corto and Motor Books, and Dennis over there have some really cool ideas that were really their ideas. They've been doing these illustrated histories. I can't remember who came up with the album by album thing, but I was there doing lots of those as well with them, and I've got one forthcoming. But this idea of at 40, Guns N' Roses at 40. So I've already done Kiss at 50, Van Halen at 50. I've done Bowie at 75. The idea is to write a book, a chronological look at 40 career highlights of the band. So we're looking at them at 40 years. 40 years matches 40 career highlights. And then the challenge is, how do you tell the story of the band? In 40 little bite-sized pieces, and then it's modularly kind of put together. It's got to go 2 pages, 4 pages, 6 pages, or whatever, and then fit a certain page count and all that, which makes you have to be really disciplined about the writing to get everything to sort of fit as well. But yeah, it's just a look at 40 sort of flashpoints. We do have to drop down on every album. That's super important because those are career highlights. But there's a lot of my opinion in there as well, and quotes from the band, some of that. But it's not particularly a quote heavy book. It's just a survey of the career and with a lot of really nice pictures and stuff.
So how long did it take you to get from the creative idea to the finished product?
Well, that's always a little complicated because it depends on what else you're working on at the same time and what other smaller fires you're putting out, like periodic journalism. Like I write, top 20 lists for Goldmine or whatever, and the odd interview. Mail order of my own books takes time. Have I had something come out at the same time that's taking a bunch of my time? So yeah, and sometimes, like I say, you're working on a couple books at once. But I have thought about that. What I noticed is that I've kind of added up and sort of scratched my head, going, how long does it really take me to write these things? And I would say, if you really had dedicated, hard writing time and spent 8 or 9 hours a day or whatever. I can't imagine any book that I'm doing is really going to take me more than a month or 6 weeks, kind of thing. It should be able to do it in that time in terms of like hard writing, but that's always spread over a fair bit of time. So I would say every book really does come in at sort of that 4 to 6 month mark. But really, you're working on it. If you're going to take that long to write a book, you're working on it very sporadically all throughout. But one thing I've learned, and it's advice I give a lot of people writing books, is once you do knuckle down and work on it, like do that heavy lifting and keep doing the writing stuff, because if your mind wanders too far off it, if you drop it for 2 whole weeks, say, it's really tough to get back in the groove and get back into the style of what you've been doing.
I feel that for just about every project I ever work on.
Right. True. Yeah.
So, as you were researching and interviewing people for the book, did anything surprise you?
Yeah, one thing it's kind of an obscure point, but and I've noticed this with a lot of bands, and it's really a failing of mine. But I see it working on the things I'm working on now. I go, oh, I can't believe they're on tour again. Oh, look, they're on tour. So Guns N' Roses did a lot of they really were out there, whatever incarnation it was, they really have been putting in the work touring. And quite periodically, you would have guest members come up, whether it's ex-members of the band or even just kind of like superstar cameo guests come up on stage. So why I say it's kind of a failing of mine is that as I'm writing a book like this, I go, it's kind of newsy, and I don't know if I forgot that or if I even knew it in the first place. So, as you get older, you realize you realize how little you actually know, and how if you're not really paying attention all the time, you won't get all the news like you did as a kid. Back way back in the pre-internet days, for some reason it almost seemed like the news would get to you more than it gets to you now, because there were stable known news outlets and they would report all the news. But now our minds are so scattered in so many different pursuits that a whole lot of interesting things happens to these bands and you don't even hear about it. And I guess that's also because there's exponentially, 10 times more bands than there were in the old days. I used to say when I did those record review books that I did this big series. It started as a single book, but then it broke into 4 decades, and it's just books of heavy metal record reviews. And one of my quips is that I think I might have missed no more than 10 bands in the 70s book, 100 bands in the 80s book, 1,000 bands in the 90s book, and 100,000 bands in the 2000s book, right? So it's almost like the same reason there's no phone books anymore. You can't review every heavy metal album and put it in a book now. And I think that goes with bands too. There's just so much going on in our lives, so much media in so many different directions. We have access to everything that a lot of news that happens to these bands just slips by.
For this Guns N' Roses book, I don't know if, as an author, did you have to get any permissions from anybody in the band to put this book together, or is this kind of like an unauthorized biography thing?
Yeah, I've never actually gone and done that. I mean, one or two times out of the 135 books I've done, has there been any real dialogue with the bands? But no, books on bands, books on celebrities and stuff, you just kind of go do them. What you do have to get permissions for is photography, because photography is owned by the photographer. But other than that, if you've interviewed the band or whatever, those are your interviews to use, unless you've ever signed what are those things called? I don't even know the name.
Non-disclosure.
Yeah, well, non-disclosure. I don't know if that's it. It's more like a limited media use thing. There's a term for it, and I don't know the term because I've never had one put in front of me for anybody. But I've had a lot of rock critics have had those things put in front of them. I believe for Courtney Love or maybe for Sting or somebody like that. But I've never, anybody I've ever talked to, that's never really come up. That actually comes up with photographers once in a while, I hear as well, where they say, you here's your photo pass. You can come in, you can shoot pictures. You can only use it for that magazine that we've agreed on that we're going to get interviewed for, or whatever kind of thing. So no, it's just a book like any book, any nonfiction book through the history of all nonfiction books is like, we're reporters. We're just reporting on stuff.
Yeah, I know Axel, at least back in the day, was pretty I don't know the term that I want to use, but he didn't like taking people taking his pictures without prior, we all saw the temper tantrum he threw when he jumped off the stage at St. Louis or wherever it was.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. I mean, back in the Wild West days, there were really no rules around taking pictures or not, unless it was, I guess there were rules at the door. I've heard lots of old school photographers, give those funny stories about sneaking in cameras and stuff, right? So I suppose, yeah, I suppose there's are often sometimes rules for that, but it also goes to the whole. I once knew the exact rules, but I've kind of forgotten them. But the whole idea around street photography, right? What are you allowed to take a picture of, and where from, and of who, and then how can you use it, kind of thing, if you're out in public, sort of thing. So yeah, it's interesting, all of this, rights to likeness and stuff.
So you said that this book was part of a series. Is this a series that you're putting together, or is it a series by the publisher, or maybe a combination of both?
It's the publisher. They've done some other ones. There's been a Rush at 50 at least. There's been an Alice Cooper at I don't know what Alice Cooper would have been at, 74, 75.
I think that one was 75.
Okay. So there's been a few other ones. Like I say, I've done two or three. I've also done a lot of their album by album series, and I even back in the old days, I did the illustrated biography series, which is, that was a weird one. That was like just a low word count and a lot of pictures, but still just a sort of biography of the band. But when you're told 36,000 or 40,000 words, it's hard to write much of a history. And in those, they would parachute in some other writer to do like a record review, and I was parachuted in on two or three of those on someone else's book. But yeah, it's a cool series, and the album by album thing is neat too. That's where I assemble a panel of 12 or 15 people, and I interview them all separately, and we go through the studio albums of a band, and I just do a Q&A moderator thing of it. So we've done a lot of those as well. My recent one there, not much older than the Guns N' Roses book, was the Judas Priest album by album that we did.
Wait, an interesting perspective here. You said something about 30,000 or 40,000 words, being not that much. And if I was tasked personally to write something that was 30 or 1,000 or 40,000 words, I'd probably have a panic attack.
Right. Yeah. Well, behind me here somewhere is my Iron Maiden book, which is derived. It's called Hallowed by Their Name, the unofficial Iron Maiden Bible. And years ago, I did a self-published trilogy of little books on the band. So now that thing is the full color throughout hardcover actualization of that, and that's my longest book ever. It's 666 pages, and it's probably 350,000 words, something like that. And then my Rush trilogy, which is three separate books, is the same kind of thing. It's about over 300,000 words.
That's obviously you're the better writer than I am.
Or just faster. I could be a lousier writer too, right? So, but that is an important thing to get this many books out. And it's advice I give people who want to write books is like, half jokingly, I ask, "Are you a stone cutter?" Because that's a term used for. I've seen people like this where they'll just spend a half hour on like a one paragraph email or something, or if they're asked to write a outline of something, they'll take days to do it. It's like, you can't write books, forget it. Yeah.
Well, I understand that, especially, with social media now. If you post something and you get one word wrong, some people are just on you. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah,
So
for sure.
it takes me a half an hour to write a paragraph sometimes, and then I still get it wrong, or
Yeah.
autocorrect gets it wrong for me.
Yeah. Well, on that topic of like getting stuff wrong, it's like when you're writing these books, I tend to always in the back of my mind, I have armies of obsessive fans that know way more about this band than I do, and I feel like a fraud, right? But that's who you're kind of trying to please. You're just scared to death every sentence you write that you're going to get something wrong that someone's going to point out and catch you out on, and which happens. But generally speaking, it's a little bit like that idea of you don't want to see how the sausage gets made. Where you do this book, it's like an artist doing a painting or whatever. It's like they don't want you to see it halfway through, kind of thing. They want you to see it finished once you've considered everything. And so in the end, I guess what I'm saying is, in the end, it looks pretty impressive. But all along the way, that and what happens, especially in a book like this, I found, because there are so many rumors and stories, and who's got the right stories and who's saying it's right, and who was on what drugs and booze when they have been, thought it happened and then told the story. And so quite what happens when I do these books. So often you have two or three different versions of the story, and you have to synthesize it together, kind of pick the right one, and then write parts of it a little bit vague. So you think, okay, well, that's my out. If I get in that little part wrong, I'm going to say September 77 instead of September 17th, 77, right? All these little tricks to keep it vague enough and try to pick the right story. And then what happens, which drives me crazy, because I have no method for doing this properly, is if months down the line some editor comes to me and says, "Are you sure you got that right? Because I thought it happened this way." It's like, you know what? I probably thought about it for a whole half hour at that time and picked what I thought was right, and I came up with this, and now you're telling me this, and I can't remember. How firmly do you believe that? Because I think I've studied it, but I'm not positive that I studied it, right? So sometimes, yeah, it's there are gray areas with these stories, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, we all know that there are three sides to every story.
Yeah.
So, do you have anything else coming up that you would like to talk about real quick?
Well, yeah, just recently coming out right now is my new Dio book, this big yellow one behind me here. So that's also a big 400-page full color throughout book. It's called The Unholy Scriptures, the unofficial history of the complete Dio canon, or something like that, Dio band canon. So it's just about Dio, the band. So that's coming out. And then also right behind me, that big, huge Deep Purple one there is just called 7 Decades of Deep Purple. That's also 250,000 words. That's a hardcover that's coming out next month. And then I've got two coming out through this beloved publisher, Quarto, that I can't say anything about because they haven't announced them yet. But one that is coming out that they have announced is called Kiss 76. And that's coming out, I think, February or March 76, or 26. Yeah, 76. That would be a long lag time. But so it's coming out just into the new year, celebrating the 50 years since the momentous year for Kiss. So it's a book about Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over, the originals, that touring, but also it's a book about what TV shows were on and what other bands were happening and who was president and who won the Super Bowl and all that kind of stuff. So it's a book about the year 1976, but 85% of it is what happened to Kiss in 1976.
Well, that being my favorite band, I'm going to have you back on for that book.
Sweet. Excellent. Look forward to it, Al. Excellent.
All right. Well, tell my audience where they can find Guns N' Roses at 40.
Well, that's a bit of a long story. I normally would say go to martinpopoff.com, but I don't have it for sale at my site right now because there's been a lot of tariff craziness that's gone on, and I shut my website and then slightly opened the door on it. So the only ones you can get from me right now are the Dio can be ordered, the Iron Maiden can be ordered, my updated Merciful Fate, my updated Max Webster, my 2 Sabbaths, my 2 UFOs, and my Sweet Book. That's all that's there right now. But Guns N' Roses is totally out in full distribution. You can probably get it in your brick and mortar bookstores, and you certainly get it at Amazon.
All right, Martin. Well, I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, Al.
Thanks for listening to Big Al's Rockin' Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe on your preferred podcast outlet. Visit BigAlRocks.com to find past episodes, on-demand links to my radio show, links to my social media, and other Big Al shenanigans. Most importantly, please like and share this episode. Peace out.